Well, it's a pleasure to talk to you today. This new record, the Botanical Gardens, it's cool. It's great to hear you doing, another album. I know, time passes a little bit longer these days between records as it does for any artist, who's been through decades in their career. That first single, you kind of came, you're kind of known for coming from the folk scene, but it feels like it's got a little bit of a blues lean to it. Is that something that, were you a big blues fan growing up too?
Well, I have a lot of different influences in what it is that I do. And I don't think that I've ever really been properly analyzed, as the writer that I am and the performer that I am, because much emphasis has always been on American Pie or Vincent. And really, there's a whole lot more music going on than the styles that are in those two songs. But I put out many albums that do many different things. And there are also many different styles of songs on one record. Even this latest album has many different concepts, Rock and Roll Your Baby and The Lucky Guy. And those songs are kind of like old rock and roll. And then, Ain't She a Honey is kind of a bluesy thing. And, there's country, and then there's, I don't know what you'd call Botanical Gardens or Total Eclipse of the Sun. Those are rock and roll, I guess. So it's just all what I do, and it's kind of mixed up.
One of those songs I'll mention, by the way, When July Comes, the melancholy feel of that, like it's so theatrical in a way. I kind of centered in on that, and I don't know, one of those songs you kind of get under your skin and crave more and more the more you hear it.
Yes, that was an unusual song. It was built off a guitar lick. I write a lot of my songs on the guitar, as I always have, and it's an unusual one. And there are a few songs on the record that have just popped up out of nowhere and surprised me. So it was fun in that sense, writing the album. But you want to keep the quality high. And each song has got to be very good. Otherwise, you'd say, well, forget that. I won't do anything. I'll just wait. It took a couple of years of writing and collecting songs and rejecting others and fooling around before I was finally happy. And then the record deal was on and then it was off. So that lost another year or almost 2 years on that. So, that explains partly why the time was so long. But I have other stuff in the can now, so if they want any more, I'll have something else to follow it with.
With so many different styles, as you're talking about, new ways of writing when you're going into a new record, trying not to repeat yourself as, a good artist will try to do. Does it become a challenge when you're this far in, this many songs in, this many albums in, to find that new rock to pick up?
No, not really, because I'm kind of directed by a certain inner, roadmap of some kind. And when it starts, I'll say, well, okay, this botanical garden idea sort of evolved, and then some other stuff happened. Some tracks were made. The record sounded. Then I said, let's go in the studio and we'll make it more songs with the album, with the guys in the band, fill out the album. So, it went like that. And then BMG really liked the record and wanted to put it out. Big surprise, I didn't do it for a record deal or anything. And so the next time around, there are a lot of thoughts. The world is quite an interesting place right now in the sense that it is sort of rational. So it's challenging. I'm always thinking about some new metaphor, really, to get my head around. And once I do that, I find a way to go, another roadmap will appear and another album will probably happen.
I know, a lot of artists are finding the challenge right now of writing things that are sort of reflective of what we're going through, in all ways. Back in the day and throughout your career, for instance, you played a lot of anti-war rallies, and I was wondering, does that carry over into the current politics of the day in your songwriting?
Well, no, because I think there's a lot of disingenuousness around now, and I think it was more sincere when we were dealing with our friends and buddies being killed in Vietnam. To have people in Hollywood all dressing in black as if they suddenly discovered the casting couch after 60 years, is a laugh.
did you find yourself then facing that and asking, do I want to write that song? Do I want to write the song about that?
Well, I can't figure out what to, I wouldn't, if I wanted to, I can't quite figure out what to say. You want to make sure that you write about things that really are going to last, the things that, you want to say something about. For example, if you were to write a political song, a topical song, I think a more important one would be police brutality in some of these places around the country, shooting a kid 9 times with his hands up. If I were to write that kind of song, that'd be a more interesting topic than some of this other stuff.
Turning, I guess, to less serious matters, and there's no easy way to do that. Total Eclipse, you were mentioning that earlier. Is there any chance that was spurred from last year's, or just impeccable timing?
No, that's actually a true story. It happened to me in 1963, and it happened on that weekend. And I just have had that in the back of my mind for decades, and I decided to write the song.
I'm always surprised. I don't know why I'm surprised, but to hear, when you hear about songs that have stuck around for that long for an artist, that you didn't give up on it, that eventually that idea finally found its way out.
Well, it doesn't give up on you. That's the thing. I didn't want to think about that weekend, for the rest of my life, but it kept coming back in my head and remembering the whole story. And then when this album started coming together, I said, well, maybe it's time to actually try to do something with that because it fits in.
And with that in mind, too, Botanical Gardens, that stems from a real place, right?
Yeah, I love gardens, and I love flowers, and I love the woods. I live in the forest. I live in the desert out in California, so I live in somewhat isolated places. I love nature. I'm a bit of a pantheist. I don't know if you know what that word means. It means that I find God everywhere in nature and not in church. Pantheism. So that would be sort of what I am. And so I often find, solace by walking in gardens in, New York City or wherever. And this was in Sydney, Australia. I always go for walks in those gardens there because they're right next to the Sydney Opera House, and I usually stay there in a hotel near there. And that whole idea just developed in my head.
That's a cool song. And, I actually have that
Thank you.
written there beside my notes, a metaphorical heaven, in a sense.
Yeah, it really, a Shangri-La or a heaven or an afterlife or some kind of a dream notion of what perhaps the afterlife would be. I don't know.
No, I'm glad the way it happened. Like I said, I'm so impressed by this record. I've really enjoyed listening to it all.
Thank you.
Yeah, like I said,
Thanks a lot.
I'll probably keep coming back to. I've got a lot of favorites on it, but every time, man, when July comes, I really feel like, I already feel like that one's a classic. Personally speaking, I'm having a good connection to that one. So.
Well, thank you very much. It's turned out very well as a record, and the song is exactly what I wanted musically. It's so hard to really capture something. And what I try to do is visual. It's visual as well as, it's a story and it's a character development, but the visual aspect of the song is what makes the story powerful. And the visual is, of course, enhanced by the musical side of the song. It has to sing and be. What I do is it's a very natural thing. It's not like it's a composed piece of music. It comes from inside me, and it's very very natural in that sense. If I ever try to sit down and write, a melody to a poem or do something like that, it usually doesn't work out that well. Yeah. But if I have an idea like that, it just comes out in a dramatic way because it's the kind of thing that it is.
Looking back at some of your classics, I don't think anybody's surprised in that. That those have always been there, and the ones that everybody's still singing to this day, the way those stories paint the picture, in the music.
Well, I always surprise myself because I never know if I'm ever going to do it again. I don't think anybody is so confident that they think that since they did some nice work that they're going to be able to repeat it. Many stories have happened in the biographies of artists, of people who had a nice few moments and then never did a damn thing again, because they just couldn't do it. I've been lucky. I've had a pretty good run where things would come to me, and it hasn't been a complete washout, because it certainly could have been.
I hope you don't mind me asking about one of those classics. I mean, with the movie Vincent having just premiered, I see, as usual, almost like clockwork, there's a renewed interest in people are covering that song again. Does that make its way to you every time? Do you also notice that?
Well, I'm excited, by the fact that Ellie Goulding, I think, and James Blake both did these beautiful versions of the song, and the song is really out there in the wind. And then the original manuscript of the papers that I composed the song on are at the Country Music Hall of Fame right now on display, and so there's something going on with that song. These songs have a way of reappearing, and that is a particularly unique song. I did the right thing there. It carved out a personal and I should say artistic niche of some sort that is a touchstone for people to come back to once in a while. And I have had a difficult time, and it's not been made public. The struggles with music and personal struggles and getting things together and getting up off the canvas, keep struggling to make, with record companies to put out albums and records that they didn't want or didn't understand. And then later on they did, and, all this stuff. I've never had an open road, and it takes its toll.
I know music's not easy. A music career is not easy for anyone with or without hits. So, that you're still pumping out, the songs that you are, I think is a great testament.
Well, I feel like I have something I want to do for people. That's why I've devoted my life to doing this. There's a certain humanitarian aspect to this. So much of the music business is about money and more money and, bigger places and louder and, Springsteen and all this stuff. And that's not why I got into this. I got into this to do something beautiful. And the fact that I've been able to have a very nice career for many decades is a tremendous gift,
I had sort of a silly question to tag on here at the end, and I'm going to go ahead and go for it. As I look back on a lot of the songs that you did write, do you ever wish that you would get some royalties for Killing Me Softly?
No, I don't. No, I don't want other people's royalties. I'm very, but it's been an interesting thing because that happened right around the time that "And I Love You So" was number one with Como. "Killing Me Softly" was also going to be a number one. I think it was in the same year, and a lot of those, the people like Johnny Mathis and Andy Williams and the pop singers recorded both of those on the same album, which was kind of funny. I remember seeing that. But that's just a story of me. Well, one of the best things that ever came out of playing the Troubadour in Los Angeles, because I signed an agreement with Doug Weston to be able to play there twice a year for like 4 or 5 years, thinking that, it would be a nice thing to do as things went along. And then all of a sudden American Pie, hit, and I didn't want to be there at all, but I stayed there, and every year I'd play it twice a year, and it was really, really a drag. But that came out of it. Laurie Lieberman came to the show and heard me sing "Empty Chairs," and then wrote this poem and went back to the two guys that wrote the song, and they incorporated her ideas into the song, and so that's how I got into this picture.
That's a really cool thing to happen, though, because one day you're just sitting there doing your job, and it's got such an effect, as so many of your songs have on people. But it turns out that time, produces its own amazing classic. That the ripple effects on these things are uncountable. You can't. But
and that's the reason why you don't think about immediate results, immediate reaction, immediate money, all that stuff. You don't think that way. I'm in for the long haul. And what I like to do is maybe I'll have something that gets a lot of attention, and then maybe I'll have some seeds that I'll plant, and they'll pop up 10 years from now. So that's my approach.
Like I said, I'm grateful that you're doing it. I appreciate everything you've done. And
Thank you.
Congrats again on this record. It's a really fine record. I'm really loving it.
Thank you very much. And I know you mean that, and it means a lot to me because I haven't heard that from anybody in quite a while. Thank you.
No problem, Don. It was a real pleasure talking to you.
All righty.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.